eyes of flame, unmasking the players in the shadowed game, where the silence breaks, the hidden shakes. She names the unspoken, the world away.
Okay, hey there, everybody. Glad to see you today. We have a fairly small crowd in our chat, but I will bring them up right now. Welcome to the Telegram chat. We have Danny, who's not feeling well today. She's got a bit of a tooth problem. We've got Joe, Heidi, Deborah, Doris, Marjo, Angela, Leslie, Susan, Ruby, Jody, Annie, and Carrie. I guess it grew as I was playing the intro. Today I got quite a bit to start with, but I thought what I would do before I got started was start talking about Virginia, because, I am a Virginian, and I happen to love the story that's coming out today about a raid on Senate President Pro Tem Louise Lucas, and a raid on her headquarters and right next door her cannabis dispensary. The word on the street is it's about illegal sales of marijuana. However, when I looked into it, we find out that there were 10, as many as, or even more than 10 warrants issued this morning across the state. And when you go digging into her background, you find out she runs a place called the Lucas Lodge. Lucas Lodge is 100% Medicaid funded, and they've got places all over the place. They actually provide services. It's all Medicaid funded, so you can go guess where that's going. They've got transportation, they've got care for disabled people, they've got several other, I'm trying to think, there's a daycare, I think, as well. But every bit of it is Medicaid funded. And when you start adding up all those sites, the 2 down in Portsmouth, plus the other sites that are around the state, you get at least 10 sites. So it is my opinion, because nothing's been verified yet, that the raid is about a lot more than cannabis. I think the cannabis raid was more of we might as well grab that too. It's interesting because, the 4 a.m. talking points don't come at 4 a.m. anymore. I was particularly looking for any comments coming out of any of our politicals in the state. And you got the Speaker of the House in the state saying that he's already setting it up. Far more theatrics and speculation than actual information, and questioned the presence of the national media like Fox on the scene. When I was listening to the reporter for Fox, they had several people trying to photobomb and to disrupt any reporting that she was going to do. So that was totally, they sent out the dogs. It's interesting because according to all of the reporting, the first place they raided was Louise Lucas's home. And yet when she came up to the scene where the raid has taken place on her headquarters, she says, I don't know what's going on. And then her daughter was there. I don't know what's going on. Her daughter is an interesting sort as well. You had U.S. Rep. Bobby Scott, come out, and he said, you gotta view this investigation in the context of recent political battles. So again, you've got two politicals that are speaking out. And so it begs the question is if they're on the same committees or have anything to do with the benefits that she was receiving. Now they're the House, she's the Senate. But the special funding that came through they increased Medicaid rates, and then all of that funding went to these very programs that we've been hearing all over the country are riddled with fraud. What was interesting to me was Abigail I was going to call her by my favorite nickname. I will be very, very nice. Name is Governor Abigail Spanberger. Let's go with her real name. We have all kinds of names for her. Anyway, she said that they are aware of what's going on, but would not comment further while the investigation is ongoing. If that isn't an oopsie, I don't know what is. That says she not only knows what's going on, she knows the genesis of the investigation. So full stop on any of the other comments that come out. I'm sure the media is going to be focusing in on Speaker Scott and Rep. Bobby Scott. So you got Don Scott and Bobby Scott. The media is going to focus in on their comments because we got to paint this as retaliation. But Spanberger's little note was much more interesting to me. So that is really where that's at. The raid is still going on from what I can tell. They arrested 3 people at the dispensary, and that was made very visible, very public. We saw many boxes coming out of the headquarters next door, which not only is her campaign headquarters and her particular office headquarters, but it's also where her family-run businesses are run out of. So that really focuses in on that. And the fact that her residence was raided first, and then they kind of expanded that. And we know the 10 warrants or plus, we know at least 10 warrants, according to the reports, across the state, takes it way out of the cannabis dispensary. So I'm pretty sure it's a Medicaid fraud investigation. I'm pretty sure that this is going to get bigger pretty quickly. But what was really interesting is there's another thing coming out of Virginia, and I'm so pleased to see that Virginia's in the spotlight. Finally, we've been wondering for years, what the hell are they doing with Virginia? But according to, and thank you, Angela, for this post, new from DOJ, the Justice Department notified the Fairfax County, Virginia Commonwealth's attorney, Steve Descano, of the of the initiation of a federal investigation into the Commonwealth's attorney plea bargaining. And it looks like my telegram is roboting. I apologize for that. So the Commonwealth's attorney plea bargaining, charging decisions, and sentencing policy. I don't know what's going on with my telegram. If that isn't frustrating. Last week it was sound. This week it's telegram. Yeah, hopefully the roboting has stopped. Is it stopped? No. Okay, good. Roboting has stopped. Thank you. Hopefully everything is okay out in Pilled and Rumble. Always going to have some kind of technical issue, right? Anyway, the charging decisions, what they're saying is he was favoring illegals over citizens. So there's a federal investigation started into that. And Fairfax County, for those that aren't from here, is like the hotbed of a lot of the Northern Virginia corruption that's been going on. They're the ones that, they had 35,000 votes even for the referendum on April 21st. So we'll see where that goes. We're watching, but it is hopeful because finally it looks like Virginia may be in the spotlight regarding the redistricting. It looks like we have a slight edge right now. The Supreme Court looks to have taken the least politically consequential path through this, even though the referendum has been determined to be illegal from the jump. That's the Tazewell County judge's opinion. But just, that alone isn't enough. So what they seem to be going after is whether or not the vote for the referendum followed the Constitution's 90-day rule. We still haven't heard about that. We don't know what's going on, but the Supreme Court did not deny. They allowed the lower court's ruling, Tazewell County, to ban or at least stay for now the certification of that election pending all this litigation. And when the Democrats tried to stop that, they went to the Supreme Court, SCOVA, and SCOVA said, no, we'll let that certification stand while the litigation pens. So where they allowed the referendum to move forward pending the vote, now nobody's wanting the vote is not being certified until the Supreme Court renders its decision on the constitutional provisions. It looks like they're focusing on the 90 days. So we have a slight edge. Keep it in your prayers, because if that referendum goes through, it's going to be disastrous. And I am hearing that there's no sound. Where's there no sound? Is everybody hearing sound on Pilled and Rumble? Please tell me you're hearing me.
I'm hearing you, Feisty.
And you're hearing me in Telegram. You're hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay, so we got Pilled is good. Rumble, I don't see anybody talking, but I'm sorry. So Deborah said she had no sound, so I'm really curious. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, Hive Dog, I see that. Rumble's been acting up. 555 question mark, right? We'll see if anybody responds. Hopefully they do. So, but today, now that I've gone through the Virginia news, I have to, of course, go through that. As a Virginian, it's my duty, right? Today I wanted to do something a little bit different because I don't think a lot of people feel like talking anyway. It kind of hurts me in the end. But I am going to share my screen and I am going to play a video. I'm going to stop it now and again. But all kinds of research on this video. I got this goes back to the Russiagate years. I got all the information on that. And I'm going to stop it now and again. This is Hannity's interview with Kash Patel yesterday. So enjoy this video. I'll mute up now. Hold on. There you go. There you go. Enjoy. Again, my apologies. I don't know why the sound isn't coming through on the video. I'm trying to figure it out as I go through this. For some reason, my desktop isn't coming through on my audio mixer. And yes, we know me. Just chalk it up to me.
Techno Challenge Wednesday. That's what it is.
The mandate of the FBI has been restored by President Trump. The FBI agents, 15 to 20 years to be able to do our job on the streets of America. And they're doing it because President Trump gave us the authority to do it. The win
every single solitary American. It's hard to fathom that in the last 4 years under Biden-Harris Mayorkas that they allowed over 12 million unvetted illegal immigrants from over 200 countries, many with terror ties. We have known terrorists in the country, murderers, rapists, child molesters, cartel members, gang members, other violent criminals. And this is the mess on top of the corruption that Donald Trump inherited and handed off to the guy that's hanging out with us today, our FBI director, Kash Patel. Kash, great to see you, man.
It's good to be here, Sean. Thanks for having me.
All right, long, fun story, and I'm not going to go into the details of what it was about. I got to introduce you to President Trump. Do you remember?
That's right. I absolutely do.
In his first term.
Yep.
Yeah.
First time in the Oval ever.
That was your first time in the Oval ever? Mm-hmm. I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
And we had 2 meetings with him at different times. And it's none of your damn business what it was about. There you go. But it was nothing bad. And now you're the FBI director. I just want to freeze frame what you inherited. Okay? Just illegal immigration alone. Understand a lot of it falls under the purview of DHS, Tom Homan, who I admire a lot. They've done a great job.
Yeah.
Known terrorists, murderers, rapists, child molesters, other violent criminals, cartel members, gang members, and then everybody's screaming, "Where's the JFK files?" You inherited what?
Wow. It's a good thing we have more than a couple of minutes
We have plenty of time
to discuss this. So look, the biggest problem is what you identified. And when President Trump appointed me to be the FBI director, he said, Kash, you got a mandate to do 2 things. Crush violent crime and defend the homeland, and also level the institution that has become the weaponization of law enforcement in this country. We'll get to the second part later. When it comes to crime in this country, President Trump secured the border. He had the audacity to do it, and he did it. Then he came back in and said, we've had 4 years of open border. We've got criminals running around this country. And I know we rifle off statistics all the time, but if your audience takes away nothing else from this show, then it's the following, because behind statistics are real people. Last year,
highlight that, and I don't want to interrupt. Behind statistics are real people. That is like Laken Riley's family, Rachel Morin's family, Jocelyn Nungary's family. Democrats wouldn't stand for them and honor them at that joint session.
I was there. Yeah. So behind not just those families, communities, kids, adults, everybody that wants to live the American dream. In 2025, in 1 year under President Trump's leadership, this FBI arrested 40,000 violent criminals. That's not the total arrest the FBI had. That number's closer to 80,000. But the 40,000 violent criminals we arrested, Sean, was a 112% increase from 2024. 112% increase. If this FBI under Donald Trump did nothing else but that, that is the only thing the mainstream media would be talking about if it was a President Kamala Harris. Now go behind the numbers. How can there be 40,000 violent criminals to arrest by just the FBI in 1 year? Break that down by state. 50 states. You do the math. We're talking murderers, rapists, pedophiles, gangbangers, terrorists, everybody that wants to harm our way of life, that President Trump stood up and ran on and said, we are going to crush violent crime. That's what we did. That number alone is emblematic of 2 things. One, President Trump is the absolute most successful president in U.S. history in reducing crime in the history of America. And 2, why are there so many violent criminals in the United States of America? And you hit on it. The open borders policy and the lax rules laid out by the opponents of President Trump to be pro-crime. Remember, these are the defund the blue movement people, to defund law enforcement. Trump resourced law enforcement and the FBI. So that number, 40,000 violent criminals, 112% increase in the first year under President Trump.
Okay, so I never do this on the podcast, but I get very frustrated because, and maybe I should be grateful, because the media does not tell the truth. And I think it's one of the greatest untold stories, and that is the numbers, the lives behind the numbers. I'm going to put up some full screens. I don't do this on my podcast, but I'm doing it here because the story is so deep, so wide, so profound, and it's impactful to everybody in a small town or a big city across the country. I mean, for example, and I'll put up the first one. Okay, in 4 years, they got 4 of the FBI's 10 most wanted.
Under Biden.
Under Biden. You've been in office a year when you eventually got sworn in, a little over a year?
Yeah, 14 months.
14 months. Okay. 8 of the 10 most wanted FBI on the FBI most wanted list, 10. I mean, 8 out of 10. That is an insane number. Now, I'll add to that. And by the way, in some cases, fugitives that have been on the run 70 years. Mm-hmm. In D.C., where the president put a surge of police instead of defund, you have motor vehicle theft down 56%, homicides down 52%, robbery down 23%, burglary down 21%. Okay, that should be a big story.
Especially in our nation's capital. What President Trump did was resource law enforcement, bring in the interagency, and unlock the FBI's greatest partners, state and local law enforcement authorities. And he went into D.C. and he said, not in the nation's capital. And we also did it in cities across America, whether it's Memphis or Miami or Dallas or San Francisco or L.A. But D.C., with the president's backing and with the backing of local law enforcement there, we were able to completely annihilate violent crime in the nation's capital, as it should be. And again, if you go back to, had President Kamala Harris done this, it would be the only story.
Hold on, I'm getting sick.
that the mainstream media would be talking about. Here's the theme that I think has been leveled by the mainstream media against President Trump. He did everything they wanted done. It's just that he did it, so they're pissed off at him. He shattered violent crime. He safeguarded American communities. We got 8 of the top 10 most wanted. Again, these are just stats we talk about, but we went around the world and found these animals and brought them here. Guys that have been on the run for 60, 70 plus years in total, and put them in American prisons. You can't do that unless you have a commander in chief that says law enforcement is supreme and law enforcement is going to be supreme across the country, because that's what Americans voted for in record numbers when they put President Trump back in office.
So besides myself, have many other media outlets cover this?
I haven't seen too many. You've been...
Have you seen any?
Outside of you guys? No, not really.
Outside of Fox?
No. There's been some, other podcasts and streamers that cover it. Obviously, there's a good amount of them on social media, but no, they won't touch it. And they won't touch it because President Trump did it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put up another screen. Operation Gangster Paradise. 30 pre-dawn raids, 30 alleged members of the Mexican mafia in Southern California. You've also gone after the hate groups that go after synagogues and target specific groups. Tell us about that.
So 2 things, Sean. When I got to the FBI, I said, what is the one thing that is causing crime across the country? Not just the influx of illegal criminals and violent actors from everywhere in the world. It was localized street gangs. And I've never talked about this because you simply can't on a 3-minute show at night. Localized street gangs that were supported. And I'm not talking TDA and MS-13. We're handling that too. Localized street gangs in LA, in Miami, in Denver, in New York, in Chicago. Do you know how many street gangs we dismantled last year? 1,800 localized street gangs have been eliminated from the streets of America through Operations Gangster Paradise, Operation Viper, and other things that we do. 1,800. That number, Sean, is a 20% increase from 2024. When you wipe out not just the headshed, the overseas components, the TDAs of the world, the MS-13s of the world, and you go down to the root level in the streets of LA and elsewhere and wipe out. And what we did in Philadelphia, I was there on the ground. We literally took out an entire city block in West Philadelphia of a localized street gang, and they're all in prison. They're the ones dealing dope. They're the ones getting illegal firearms. They're the ones holding up everyday Americans as hostage and stealing their money and jacking their cars. That was a power that had not been unleashed. And this is what happens when you let good cops be cops. The FBI agents have come to me time and time again and said, we have been waiting 15 to 20 years to be able to do our job on the streets of America. And they're doing it because President Trump gave us the authority to do it.
You know, maybe this is a good moment to pause and get into this whole ideology, philosophy. It's being pushed by the left. Defund, dismantle, no bail, reimagine the police. Okay, that's some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life.
I mean, just look at the tragedies of this cashless bail policy. Every month we read about some violent offender who gets bail on a violent crime and goes out and does what? Murders a young American. Deals fentanyl to young school children, and they overdose and die. And that had never been highlighted except by President Trump. He is turning every democratic weaponized institution of justice on its head and challenging them to say, why aren't you passing these laws that are leading to the aimless deaths of young Americans? And again, he's the one centering the focus point on law enforcement. And that's what we're doing. We have to have state and local legislators fix that problem. President Trump can't do it at the federal level, but what we can do is make sure we roll these guys up, which we're doing in record numbers, and put them behind federal bars so they don't ever get out.
Isn't it, I say this often, isn't it a prerequisite to pursue happiness? To be able to pursue it, you need law and order, you need safety and security.
Yeah.
And that's not the life many Americans live. They don't have, if you're talking about entire streets, neighborhoods that are overrun by the gangs, the mobs, the little mafia groups, and then the bigger groups, MS-13, Tren de Aragua, etc. I mean, how do people pursue happiness when they are being terrorized?
That's just it. Now we're back on track to letting them pursue happiness. And if I could just tell a story out of my life,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do, what drives me every single day. You're talking to a kid, the son of parents who fled a genocidal dictatorship in East Africa,
Right.
emigrated here lawfully, and watched their son become the director of the FBI. That is the American dream. But it's not about me. It's about capturing that lightning in a bottle and handing that American dream to every single kid out there. That's what President Trump's driving. More and more young Americans, more and more communities are saying the American dream, the right to pursue happiness, is back. Don't listen to me. When I go out, I go to field offices across the country. I stop in cafes across the country, and people come up to me and say, thank you to President Trump, my community's safe. Thank you to President Trump, the kids in our high school aren't overdosing on fentanyl. Thanks to President Trump, gangbangers aren't shooting people like they are in the streets of Chicago, where that governor and that mayor won't let us in to help the citizens of Chicago, even though President Trump has asked time and time again.
It infuriates me, you know, since Obama became president in 2009 on the TV show, you know, we talk about the two examples in Minneapolis, where the woman tried, whatever her name is, Renee Good, and this guy Preddy, whatever his name is. However, every weekend you can predict with pinpoint certainty in Chicago how many people will be shot, how many people will be shot and killed. I've asked Democrat after Democrat on my shows, can you name one person shot in your city? They can't name one because they can't weaponize it and use it to bludgeon Donald Trump or use it politically. Isn't that how I thought every life mattered?
Let's just look at Chicago for a second, Sean. How many times does a kid under the age of 10 have to be shot and caught in the crosshairs of gang fire before they'll do anything? How many stories of that? Double-digit stories from just last year alone. That, if it had happened under any other administration, would be the only headline saying, why is law enforcement failing its citizens, its most vulnerable citizens? But they wash over it because it's President Trump and this FBI. Even without Chicago's help, Sean, we've reduced violent crime in Chicago by 25 points. Wow. By 25 points. We're doing it anyway. And
In spite of local
them.
resistance.
And if they let us in, like they did in DC, like they did in Memphis under the president's task force, those numbers would be doubled. We'd be saving twice as many lives.
It really is amazing. Explain, and I'll put this up on the screen, the 400 FBI agents that dedicated to Indian County, or country rather, 3 brand new task force that you put together. That was a big deal that didn't get any press.
I'm so glad you brought this up. This is one of my passion projects. I think everybody in the United States of America deserves the same brand of law enforcement. Indian country, our 575 dedicated Indian tribes across the land deserve the same brand of justice. If you go onto any reservation, and I've been on more reservations as FBI director than anyone before me combined, and you talk about missing kids, you talk about murders, you talk about unsolved violent crimes, they are plagued by it. Just last week, I was in Montana on the Crow Reservation. It's the size of Rhode Island and Connecticut combined.
Wow.
They got 5 cops. 5 cops.
What?
And so what we're doing is we did a durational program last summer called Operation Not Forgotten. We just lost Operation Steadfast Promise, which is going to dedicate 400 plus agents and intel analysts across Indian country for the entire year. We solved, I think, 2,000 cases on Indian country last year alone. I want that number doubled this year. We're going to solve the mysteries behind the gruesome murder of the Emily Pikes of the world. We're not going to forget Indian country. And I'm so glad you brought it up because this is representative of millions of people across the country who think they've been forgotten by law enforcement. But when I go and see them, they say, President Trump's the first guy to send law enforcement here and show up and ask for a partnership. And we're going to continue that.
Another thing that you've done, we'll get into the issue of assassination culture in a minute. And then we're going to get into the culture of the FBI and what you inherited. You know, Dan Bongino sat in that seat and told me that there are 2 FBIs.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had to go, and a lot of people were working against both of you. But then there were other good agents that wanted to do their job. But more importantly, you know, there seems to be a targeting, and there was systemic targeting of pro-life Americans, peaceful protesters, or, you know, moms and dads that show up at school board meetings. They just care about the curriculum that is being taught their kids and being investigated as domestic terrorists.
This is the best example I can see right now to highlight the transformation of this FBI. We'll talk about the details of what we inherited, but it was a decades-long building of a diseased temple of weaponization. All the FBI did before Donald Trump and I was grow the size of the Washington, D.C. footprint. What do I mean by that? When I came into office, 1/3 of the entire FBI workforce was located in the national capital region in and around Washington, D.C. The prior directors and presidents, what they did, they loaded Washington, D.C. for bear so that they could put out things like the Catholic memo. They could go to school board meetings and terrorize parents and threaten them in their way of life and have the audacity to tell them it's the government and not the parents on how your child should be educated and brought up. What do? I took that and I said, 1/3 of the crime doesn't happen in the national capital region. We're putting the mission first in the field. I took 1,000 FBI agents out of the national capital region last year and permanently moved them across all 50 states. On top of that, I took 500 intel analysts, took them out of the Washington, D.C., the Directorate of Intelligence that we had seen been built up by my predecessors to sit in Washington and produce quote unquote intelligence. And I said, I don't need that weaponization. What I need is intelligence to drive operations in the field. And I sent hundreds of intelligence analysts permanently to the field, along with support staff. Then I took another 500 FBI employees and moved them down to Redstone Arsenal, our premier advanced training
Huntsville,
facility.
Alabama.
Yep, our premier advanced law enforcement training facility. I said, go train everyday cops from around the country on how to be better partners because they want us and we want them. So I reduced the footprint in Washington, D.C. This is maybe the biggest transformational change that President Trump asked for and we delivered on. And I shrunk that 1/3 footprint in D.C. by half.
Mm-hmm. All right. You have, and I'll put this up on the screen, Operation Fighting China. One thing I have read, and I feel like a voice in the wilderness talking about it, is Chinese nationals have been buying up massive quantities of American farmland, American ranch land, and land near our military installations. Now, I can't imagine for 1 second that President Xi, I'm going to China soon with the president, that President Xi is going to allow Sean Hannity to go in and buy land near their military installation. What the hell? Why would we ever do that?
So that's two things you highlight. One, there needs to be a congressional legislative fix because right now, the only prohibition is 1 mile in and around military installations in America.
Seriously?
So we got creative. We said, okay, while Congress works to fix that and while we work with them to fix that, what can the FBI do? So we called our state and local partners. I'll give you two examples. Down in Louisiana, with our great partner, Governor Jeff Landry, they were buying up oil rigs off the coast of Louisiana, but it was outside that 1 mile zone. So I called Governor Landry and I said, hey, this is illegal under state law. The FBI is going to help you. You know what he did? Shut down those oil rigs. In Texas, a Chinese national had bought thousands of acres of farmland in Texas and was traveling back and forth between China. He had direct contacts and connections to the Chinese government, the CCP. We couldn't get him under the current law because it was outside of a mile. So what do? We found out that he had been stockading illegal firearms on his ranch. We went in and seized every single firearm and the entirety of that ranch. And he's still sitting in China because they won't give him back to us. But now we own it and the U.S. government has it. So we're doing things like that.
Okay, common sense would dictate that if this is happening over and over again, that this has got to be some subversive plot by the communist Chinese. They're doing it for a reason. They are our number one, and as far as I'm concerned, our number one geopolitical foe. Why do they want ranch land, farmland, and land near our military installation if they're not trying to spy on us?
Sean, that's just it. That's what they're doing. If you look back at the last year, this FBI has arrested 47% more Chinese espionage actors, to include people that they have co-opted in every branch of the United States military. We are indicting and arresting at least multiple people a month for stealing secrets, providing classified information back to mainland China, and we are imprisoning them, including U.S. Navy sailors. You saw we did to the individual who was just charged in Delta Force.
Right.
And it's not just connected to China, but it's also Russia and other entities as well. But that's how they get their tentacles across the U.S. government enterprise. And so what we're doing is seeking out those bad actors wherever they are, including within the United States government.
I mean, that to me is one of the scariest things. And now we're talking about national security. I don't think China has our best interest at heart. I think they view us as an enemy. I think they've proven it over and over again. Doesn't mean we can't. Look, if President Xi's for China first, I get it. Putin's for Russia first, I get it. I'm for America first. Fine. However, they don't get to come into America. They would never allow Americans to do to them what we're allowing them to do to us. And I'm not saying that every person from China is bad. I'm just saying that maybe you need to buy your property a little further away from military installations. And why farmland? Why ranch land?
Because it allows them to get large swaths of property, import material and equipment, and also use that equipment to go spy on our military bases, our fixed wing and rotary aircraft, and our personnel. But let me put out something that's unorthodox that was led by President Trump. Protecting national security of the utmost importance, and we're doing that against these bad actors and spies. But President Trump, in his historic meeting with President Xi in Busan last year, said, we have to engage where we can. And law enforcement has that unique opportunity to do that. And the fentanyl precursors coming out of mainland China were the ones that were killing tens of thousands of young Americans.
Right.
So he kicked the door open. You know what I did? I was the first FBI director in over a decade to go to Beijing last year. And under President Trump's authority and agreement with President Xi, we shut off all 17 illicit precursors that were being delivered to the Mexican drug nationals down in Mexico and then shipped up here. That is a huge win because we worked with the MPS, which is the Ministry of Public Security, their equivalent of the FBI. And since that time, in this law enforcement space, we have sent working groups to China. They have sent working groups here, and we are tackling money laundering, scam center compounds, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, the fentanyl and counter narcotics crisis, For the first time ever in the history of the FBI, there's a daily communication between our agents and their agents in mainland China because President Trump kicked open the door. Now, like you said, their spy services are doing unimaginable harm to our national security. We're on that mission. But where we can work with them, because of President Trump, we are working with them, and we've seen a drastic reduction in the production of fentanyl because the Mexican drug trafficking organizations down south, we see it in the intel. It's not classified.
Haven't they been sending the raw ingredients to Mexico?
That's what they were doing. And there's very specific ingredients that make fentanyl as lethal as it is. Those were shut off thanks to President Trump and our engagement. And so now they're struggling to find the ingredients. And how do we know it's working, Sean? Last year alone, Sean, the opioid overdose rate, death rate in America dropped 20 points. 20 points. If any president had done just that alone, saved 20% more kids, it would be banner news year round.
This is the most frustrating thing to me because it's our national treasure and they're being targeted by these cheap street drugs and they have no idea what they're taking and they're dying in droves and deaths now are coming down.
20%.
That's that. I mean, you should take a bow because, and I'm going to get into this whole issue of your predecessors because they were focused on things they never should have been focused on. And you know probably as much, if not more than anybody in the country because you were working with Devin Nunes on all of it. All right, let me start at the beginning here. And beyond the fact that you don't get credit for anything.
Well, it's not about me.
Well, the FBI doesn't get credit.
They should.
This should be a big story that, hey, law and order works, safety and security works if you put the resources in place. They don't want to talk about that part of it. When you walked in the door, and okay, I've got to imagine within a week you realize you're drowning because of what you inherited. What you inherited, known terrorists in the country. Okay, by the way, we still know there are terrorists here, but we don't know where they are.
Yeah, that's the scary part. We're looking for them every single day because the last administration, as you highlighted, let in criminals by the thousands, violent criminals to include terrorists, and they've been sitting around and embedding themselves in our country for the last 4 years. And as we know from the Al-Qaedas and ISIS of the world, the one thing those folks have is patience.
But they came from Egypt,
everywhere,
Muslim Brotherhood. People from Iran were let into this country and let loose by Biden, Harris, Mayorkas. I mean, is it really far-fetched in the middle of a war with Iran to think that we have sleeper cells in this country?
That's what we're monitoring 24/7, 365. We're going into communities. We're using our undercover resources. We're using our online covert employees to root these folks out. And that's why you're seeing terrorist prosecutions skyrocket in terms of numbers, and people we're expelling from the countries with our partners in DHS. I think President Trump has struck the right tone. If you are a violent criminal actor, violent, the worst of the worst, then we're going to put you down here. We're going to arrest you and we're going to put you down. Everybody else, if you're here illegally and committing crimes, we're going to send you back to where you came from. That twofold parallel approach is securing America and safeguarding America. And this FBI continues to have the responsibility with our intelligence community partners to make sure all the sleeper cells are rooted out. Okay.
You walk in the door, you get confirmed by the by the Senate. You get to the infamous, what is it, 7th floor, which I've never been to. I'd like to, if you want to invite me.
Anytime you want to come.
I can come?
Anytime, yeah.
Okay. What did you look at? When did you realize, wow, this place is a mess? When did it dawn on you how bad it was?
I knew before getting in there. I think the worst thing that could have happened to the institution of weaponization and the mainstream media is the combination of President Trump and myself running the law enforcement of this country. Because as you said 10 years ago, I led the charge to expose the Russiagate conspiracy.
I need you to go back and explain that to people because you worked on the House Intel Committee, and I love Devin Nunes. He's been a friend for a long time. I spent years of my life on TV, night after night after night.
You were one of a few.
Okay.
Just a handful.
Me, John Solomon, Sarah Carter.
I'm going to pause it right here for now because what I'm going to do now is bring you into the memory hole, if you will. I'm going to go through Russiagate, what they're getting ready to talk about, because where we're at now is a very important piece of the story. And I'm whoops. So let's start with how this all started, how Russiagate began. Back in 2015, Mike Rogers, who was the head of the NSA, noticed that there were 702 breaches. They were violating the use of the 702 database. It wasn't until 2016 that he shut it down. In April of 2016, he notified the FISA, what they call the FISC, right? The FISA Intelligence Surveillance Court, that there had been abuses in the 702 database. Specific things. They were searching on names. They were using it even to search on their own names, but they were searching on names. They were unmasking people. They were doing searches without predicate on on citizens. And the FISA is for foreign. The domestic capture is supposed to be incidental. And they would use that because the Title I FISA requirement isn't as strong, or they got to have a certain rules they follow, but they were able to abuse the 702 for their domestic stuff. Okay, so Mike Rogers figured it out, and he shut down the use of that database, coincidentally, because everything's a quinky dink. He shut down the use of that database on the very same day that the Carter Page FISA got through. So there's right there. And according to the audit, 85% of Section 02 searches from November of 2015 to May of 2016 were in violation. Now let's just put that timeline together. Trump came down the escalator in June. They immediately started trying to investigate him. May 1st of 2016 is when he stopped his data capture, because he told the FISC in April. The FISC told him to go back and do a complete audit. That would have been May right there, but he didn't shut it down until he reported to the FISC the results of that audit on October 21st, 2016, which is the day he shut down that database and the Carter Page FISA went through. And hopefully you can hear where I'm going with that. But they were violating all the upstream guardrails. After learning about those issues, like I said, he shut it down on the 21st. That was the same day that FISA went through for Carter Page. Clapper recommended to Obama that Rogers be removed from his position. Rogers then travels to New York and meets with President Trump in Trump Towers. The very next day, Trump moves his campaign to Bedminster. So they already knew that Trump was being surveilled. Okay, so there's a high level getting us into crossfire hurricane. The actual investigation into Trump, illegal, started in November of 2015. Now, just so you know, there was already another investigation going on. Many of you know about this. It's the Hillary email investigations. And that investigation suddenly stopped in September of 2015. And this is interesting how the timing comes out. So if you want to know, and I don't know how many of you knew this, when they started illegally surveilling President Trump and his campaign, it was November of 2015, for sure. So there's that part of it. Now, I want to bring out something else, because they filed, because of what Mike Rogers submitted, the report he submitted to the FISC, they issued on April 26, 2017, a scathing rebuke against the FBI for their 702 breaches. Okay. So just so you know, this came out, but it wasn't until, and by the way, 2 weeks later, Mueller starts. There's just coincidences, though. I'm sure you remember these coincidences. These are just coincidences. I see. I forgot to turn my camera back on. Sorry. But anyway, the FISC came out with this scathing rebuke of the FBI and the abuses of the 702 database. That, I'm going to speed ahead because in December of 2019, we finally get the Horowitz report on the abuse of the 4 FISAs. Those are the 4 Carter Page FISAs. It wasn't until this report that the FISC connected the dots between the 702 and the Title I abuses. Title I is another form of FISA. And that led to this January 7th memo where they literally revoked the ability of members of the FBI from using FISA at all. Handling, distributing, and the FBI had to turn in information as to who was using that database. That led to, and admitted it lacked probable cause. That came out of the Justice Department, which was Barr at the time. This is January 23rd of 2020. That led to this redacted, released but heavily redacted document. And I'm pointing out the redactions because if you notice, when you see a B7 in one of these documents, that means it's law enforcement activity. You see all those B7s? There's other definitions, but it typically means there's law enforcement activity going on. And this is a very heavily redacted document. You see this. So we get some information out of this, but there was an investigation started into the abuses that were noted by this FISC release. So this is regarding Carter Page, which means there's been this big investigation going on into the abuses around the FISAs against him. Speed ahead, March 5th, we get the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court again issues a document concerned about matters related to the FISC. And in this one, they corrected their opinion, the opinion from January, and they take it further and they're saying that they now want a complete report every 90 days about the changes into these processes that the FBI is implementing. Under Director Wray, who was at that point right up until Cash came in, under Director Wray, he had implemented 40 of those changes. And you're going to hear Cash talk about this, but one of the big changes is an update to the servers that are used at the FBI. The secret servers are already converted to AI. They're in the process of converting the top secret server, which is where all those documents were hidden with the bad spellings, if you recall. So that's already underway. And Cash, his latest report, he said that he's lacking the funding because the priority is on crime prevention. On August 30th, 2020, the Attorney General, this is Barr at the time, submits one of those letters to the FISC. This is augmenting the internal compliance functions of the FBI. And he's ordering compliance and oversight mechanisms, conducting routine audits at the FBI, conducting routine audits in the use of national security letters, conducting routine audits regarding compliance with FISA and FISC orders, conducting routine audits. So these now coming out of the Attorney General's office is a series of things that the DOJ is now demanding. You know, it's interesting that the DOJ hadn't been really involved until that 2019 report by Horowitz. He supplements that on the same day. He adds a supplemental Before any application initiating or renewing the targeting of a United States person is submitted to the FISC, relevant FBI personnel is determined by the director of the FBI shall review the case file and accuracy subfile to ensure proposed application is accurate and complete. In other words, now they've got to attest stronger. Report the findings of those reviews to the attorney from the National Security Division, the National Security Division office who is handling the case. So now we need internal reporting going on. He's also saying any misstatement or omission of material fact in a submission to the FISC, as determined by NSD, must be immediately reported to the FISC in accordance with the FISC's rules. And what that is saying is, because there was a number of issues, and one of the biggest issues they had, and we've got several people we can name because of reporting that came out after this. What had happened is there was exculpable information that had been withheld from the FISC. One, the famous Kleinsmith email, where he edited the email to say Carter Page was not a source for the CIA when the CIA said the opposite. So that was what really brought about the FISAs. That was used later in 2017 to uphold a renewal of the FISA as well. And they already determined two of the FISAs were no good. They lacked a predicate. So with respect to applications for authorization to conduct electronic surveillance or physical searches to FISA targeting, federal elected official or staff members of the elected official or an individual who is declared candidate for office, they had to get prior approval. Why? Because they were targeting already. So we already had Crossfire Hurricane. Now we're targeting the Trump campaign for re-election. You're going to hear Cash say they did it again for the 2024. So that now we're putting in these rules. So things have slowed down some. What they've also done is they've announced real big reforms. Like I said, Ray put in about 40 of those reforms, and I'm going to skim through this. But the audit that came out in September of 21 is really kind of interesting. That audit itself is 60 pages, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm happy to drop the links in my chat. I will do that right after the show. But this audit came up with some real interesting conclusions. Results in brief. The FBI Woods procedures are designed to ensure FISA applications are scrupulously accurate, which they did not. In fact, if you recall, many of the FISAs that Horowitz reviewed even lacked the Woods file, which is all of the investigative and supporting information. And require agents to document support all factual assertions contained in them, which they were not doing. So that report is a result of looking at the processes that were used. Now we come up to January 31st. This is mainly coming because of the Carter Page lawsuits, which have been slowly coming through the process. The reason why that was never fully adjudicated was because there were all these investigations going on. But this amicus actually supported that there was the review of the FISAs and there were some extreme issues in the process. And then we come to the ODNI release in 2024 because of the FISC opinion. They came out and they said is the first FISC opinion issued after the reauthorization of 702 and discusses many of the changes implemented under Reforming Intelligence and Securing America Act, RISA, and how the U.S. government ensured the associated procedures conform to the new legislation. Those changes require now, like I said, the FBI has to report every 90 days, and exculpable information or any new information over what was submitted in the FISA has to be reported immediately to the FISC. So based on the audit's 7 major observations, OIA provided 11 compliance recommendations. They've now been implemented. So here we are now in 23. FBI Deputy Director highlights Bureau's new FISA query accountability procedures. And so they completely overhauled the accountability for FISA, and people are now being held individually accountable. It's no longer a mistake. This came out in October of 25. OIG releases report on FBI's querying practice under Section 702. The conclusion says today's report is attached as a PDF because it's under seal, hosted under shared services. It makes 2 observations that may be relevant to the FBI's 702 querying compliance. First, the number of queries run by FBI personnel has declined over the past several years because they tightened the rules on querying. You're not supposed to query on a name, by the way, and they were doing that regularly, not just against their opponents, but they were even checking on their own names. And several cases where they would look for their name and the person that they had met on a dating app. They were using the 702 database was being used so egregiously. I'm surprised people didn't go. Well, I'm not sure people didn't go to jail. So here's the opinion. April 12th, 702 new FISA court opinions reveals continuing violations by the FBI. This is coming out of the Brennan Center. They've been kind of the watchdog that's been reviewing this on a regular basis, and they're continually looking for civil violations, civil rights violations. So what they're saying is evasion of RISA's requirements in 24, that's 2 years old. The new FISA court orders systemic violations continued and spread, according to the New York Times and the Washington Post. I don't know how real that is. Self-policing by the FBI and DOJ isn't working. These are assumptions being made, and we don't know how they're deriving that information, but it does bring about the understanding that both the FISC, DOJ are closely monitoring what's going on at FBI when they develop these FISA applications. So there's a lot of eyes on suddenly. This is from Horowitz when he testified before the committee about these abuses. And then we come up to the FISC letters. Now, you can go up and see the letters that the FISC releases. This is up on their website. These are their public filings. I just pulled the last 2. Let me show you them. This is an unclassified filing of July 2nd. The accuracy concerns regarding FBI matters submitted to the FISC docket number. This is an ongoing case because they're continually looking for any violations of the order from the FISC. So there is now continuous monitoring. Now, why is this important? First, you have Mike Rogers noticing, because they're getting ready for their annual audit, and he's noticing that the 702 is egregiously being used. He reports that. It starts in November of 2015. That's when his data showed this extreme activity. And it went all the way through till he shut down the database October of 2016. So they were obviously targeting President Trump and his campaign. And as they were targeting him, they were feeding into the database any kind of information they can get. That's where the Steele dossier comes in, because it opened up their predicate, if you will, to do an investigation. And that's where all the Ukraine stuff comes in. So I'm going to stop for a second. Does anybody have any comments on what I've shown so far? By the way, I have the names because they've come out in successive reporting that you don't normally hear very much of. There's a Stephen Soma. He's the guy that they believe committed one of the most egregious of the violations. He was primarily responsible for some of the most important and significant errors and omissions in the FISA. He directly was involved in preparing the FISA applications, which you don't get to hear his name very much anymore. I didn't feel like looking for all my slides on this because I've got it all laid out, but from back in the day. But nevertheless, he actually is the person behind all the inaccuracies in the FISA. And the OIG report in 2019 actually highlighted that he failed to pass along any information from other U.S. intel agencies, like the fact that he was a human source. And then he was a handler for Stefan Helper. So I showed you where all that B7 activity was coming in. I showed you that, and if you were listening Monday, you saw where James Baker out of ONA, Office of Net Assessment out of the Pentagon, was actually funneling money to Stefan Helper. Now we also know that Stephen Soma was a handler for Stefan Helper. So if you think that Durham was done when he indicted Kleinsmith, Sussman, and Danchenko, told everybody then, no, he's not done. There's a lot more to this. That brings us to where we are today. So we've got 45 minutes. I'm going to play as much of this as I can, and I will stop it intermittently to point out some of the things he's talking about.
Fraudulent, fake, unverified information, funnel that to not just the intelligence community, but the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and then take those packaged lies that they had paid for with campaign finance funds and go into a secret surveillance court and illegally spy on your opponent to be the next president of the United States. I think that was 45 seconds. That took 2 years of my life. And what did we find out? The FISA court themselves came back and said these warrants were illegal, that the FBI did not provide evidence of exculpatory evidence and innocence, and that the FBI essentially lied in those applications, and all of the information was unverified. So that was step one. But I knew that it didn't stop there. I knew in the 4 years that we were out of office that they continued to regenerate that institution of weaponization. So when I walked in the door, I said, we only got a bit of it. We only got maybe half of it. Because what did we learn in those 4 years, right? That I was illegally spied on by the likes of Rod Rosenstein
Congress.
And Chris Wray and you and 10 other staffers on the Hill and people who are elected to serve this country in the halls of Congress. They were actually continuing the weaponization that Donald Trump and I had exposed during Trump 1. And we caught them. So I knew walking in the door the following. These individuals, these purported leaders of law enforcement and government, are so arrogant that they write the stuff down themselves to memorialize how great they are.
Listen.
That's how we caught them in Russiagate. It wasn't my documents. It was their emails. It was their FISA application. It was their bogus Steele dossier. It was their unverified reporting that was documented in FBI holdings that we put out and that you covered. So I knew there were other places that that information was hidden. So day one, I set out to find it, and we found it.
All right, I tried. They have the most spectacular. You can confirm this, that information may still exist, and we may have a copy. Any truth to that?
We're working on a lot of things.
You're smiling. I don't know. I like that.
That information may exist, and we may have a copy of it. Can you confirm it? Look at that smile. Is that a Kodak moment or what? Is that a Kodak moment? Keep going.
That smile. The smile is very revealing, Cash. All right. We'll save that for a different show. But let's go back. And then, of course, the infamous July 2016 presser by James Comey. No reasonable prosecutor would prosecute.
Can I just stop you right there?
Go.
The mandate of the FBI and the director is to investigate. It is illegal per the Constitution for any FBI director to make a decision on prosecutions. That is the sole province of the Department of Justice and the Attorney General.
So those of you who were in chat the other night, you heard me say this too, that what Comey did was illegal, which really had the Democrats all upset, if you can recall that presser he did. But he did something that Cash is not going to tell you. It preserved the illegal investigations. Had that gotten sent over to DOJ, they would have made a decision as to whether or not to prosecute. It was Loretta Lynch at the time. That investigation would have been shut down and tossed out a door. By not sending it to DOJ and making that unilateral decision that was illegal, that case never got closed. And all of the things that they were doing up until that point are now sealed as evidence and can be used in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. So keep that in mind as we're going after Comey.
The fact that he held that press conference and unilaterally made that decision by his own admission without informing the Attorney General is a bastardization of our version of law enforcement. And he did it because he knew the mainstream media would help him get away with it.
So I'm going to get your thoughts on Comey and Ray in a few minutes, but I want to stay focused on this. So he exonerates Hillary that way. And then what do we discover? Hillary Clinton. And this is the reason this is important is because you have said publicly you're investigating a grand conspiracy. Would you define a grand conspiracy?
Listen carefully.
As the minute Donald Trump came down the escalator till today, that there has been a coordinated effort to destroy this man?
Yes, there has. And it's not me saying it. Look at the documents. Just flip the tables, Sean. Hang on a second, right? Let's say President Trump unleashed his FBI to go and illegally surveil his opponents. What would happen? The media cycle would stop. It would be the only thing that the mainstream media would be screaming for accountability on. But just like because President Trump's the one that delivered a record reduction in law enforcement under this FBI, because it was he who was attacked unlawfully, and his surrogates and his campaign, they cover it up. So I learned as a lead investigator on House Intel that it's not my words that are the best evidence, it's theirs. Go find the documents. So what we did was, when we walked in the door, I said, hey, this conspiracy continued. It didn't end because the documents we released under the House Intel days showed that there were individuals who are continuing the work of the Steele dossier. And I said, these documents, computer hard drives, have to exist somewhere. And this is the part that's frustrating to me too. People are saying, rightfully so, where's the accountability? Where are the arrests? We are undoing 30 years of weaponization. We are doing that while delivering.
Did you catch that? Did you catch 30 years of weaponization? Can you do the math in your head, considering we're almost at 2030? You're talking since the late 90s. That takes you right back to Durham. What was Durham's nickname? The Avenging Angel, who took on who? The FBI. So to think Durham was done with Kleinsmith, Sussman, and Danchenko is very short-sighted. We're just now getting to the rest of the Durham story. So I'm just pointing out 30 years of weaponization. What was Durham most concerned with back in the 90s? They were trying to take down the mafia. And what they were doing, every time an order to raid was signed by a judge, whoever the target was forewarned and disappeared. And they figured out it was coming from within the FBI. Remember at the start of Hannity's show, he talked about 2 FBIs. One that wasn't and one that wanted to do their job. So what Durham started back in the 90s is just now culminating 30 years later. That's a sizable investigation.
Record results on crime reduction in America. And we got to get it right. So we found that room that Dan Bongino talked about. The burn bag room.
Explain a burn bag.
It's basically a large paper bag that you use to destroy and literally shred and burn classified information. So we not only found burn bags in a room that was locked away in FBI headquarters.
And they weren't burned.
They weren't burned, but the room was also off the map. It wasn't on our blueprint. And nobody had access to it. So
how did you find it?
Well, that's what we do. That's what I do. I know that
Well, that's what we do. That's what I do. Can we stop here for a second and talk about the fact that if we were trying to cover up our crime, does it make sense that we're going to store them in a burn bag in a room that's not on the blueprint? No. And what has he called that room since that first report? He said it was the closet next to the director's office.
You dump that body in the deepest, dark part of the ocean
Right.
to never be seen again.
It would have been totally destroyed. So somebody was preserving evidence this entire time. And remember, we're going back 30 years. So to say that FBI directors were corrupt, to say that Durham was a nothing burger, to say Horowitz was a nothing burger, or all the actions by the Fisk were nothing burgers would also be short-sighted, especially since we're bringing this up now, and we've got Joe DeGeneva down in Florida. We got Comey now indicted in North Carolina. We've got this big issue going on in Georgia, and no matter what you look at, Georgia's always coming up in the story. Have you noticed? No matter which way you turn, Georgia is always somewhere in that story. So we got the Southern District of New York, you got Main Justice in DC, you got the main FBI in DC that was overstaffed. You've got Georgia coming up, you got North Carolina coming up. Do you hear this major wrap up coming? Or don't you? Now everybody went quiet suddenly. Thank you, Eddie, for jumping in.
Oh, no, I see it. I was just letting hopefully somebody else sees it. I definitely see it.
You can definitely see what I've been terming as that masterful RICO for years. I've been talking about this, that there is more to come. I said it back in when Danchenko and Sussman both got off. I said, if you read those indictments, you would have seen why they got off. All Durham did was paint a picture. Kleinsmith, bias can be weaponized. It can be leveraged. Sussman, domestic spying operation. Danchenko, foreign spying operation. What Durham did was paint the picture of the size and scope of this. And for most of the public, they don't know much about what was going on in London. People inside the movement seem to keep forgetting what was going on in London. But when you put this whole thing together, targeting one man who came down an escalator in June of 2015, and they put all these resources from around the world to take him out, there was something they were worried about. And that something is getting wrapped up right now. Hopefully you guys can see this.
Where's the main part of these indictments going to come? Are they going to come out of Florida, do you believe?
I don't know. Maybe because the raid on Mar-a-Lago, which is a part of this conspiracy, happened in Florida. And it may have been a way, and this is my opinion, don't take it as fact, but that raid in Mar-a-Lago never rang right to me. Let me explain why. You don't just raid one location. And Trump was watching internal cameras while they were doing the raid from Trump Tower in New York. And he just happened to leave the day before the raid to go to New York.
Why wouldn't you go? Why wouldn't you take out Bedminster and New York? You would raid all three. Wouldn't you?
Typically, what you do is you raid all sites at the exact same time to prevent anything from leaking, right? But they only raided Mar-a-Lago. Part of me is sitting here, this is the conspiracy part of me is saying, is that the way that they moved the case out of the corrupt justice system in DC? I don't know.
Oh, no, that's a good one. I like that.
From DC to Florida.
When you look at what they collected, who can forget the Time magazine cover knock knock that was in that box, and the empty folders laid out neatly for a picture? Who can forget all of that?
Not us.
So I question whether or not the case in Florida, and the reason why there's jurisdiction down there is because of the raid, but if it's a part of this grander conspiracy, you can bring it all in. Is that how they moved the case? Is that how the case got out of the jurisdiction of DC where the big crimes were happening? So that's a thought. I don't know. I can't prove it. But I wonder. I think it's fair to ask, don't you think? Let me keep going.
These people put it in places for us to never find. But I also know what Dan talked about and you talked about.
For us to never find. Does that even make sense? If you didn't want them to find it, you would have disposed of them. Instead, they're in a locked closet. It's off the blueprint, as he said, because closets aren't normally located, right? So if it's in a director's closet in burn bags, that was intentionally retained evidence. And what did we find out was in there? You have that the pages of the classified section of the Durham report. You've got all of this other. They even found, if you recall, they found devices. Remember? So there's all this information that was found in this closet in burn bags because FBI was never supposed to find them. Well, that doesn't hold water for me.
There are a lot of good people at the FBI. Now, we got rid of a lot of bad people.
Damn, a lot of good people at the FBI.
Every single one of the people that weaponized law enforcement is gone.
You identify them, threw them out.
And they're terminated.
Okay, so Dan's theory, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, was he believes that people purposely saved this information, left little crumbs in a trail, like Little Red Riding Hood, wanting you to find it. That it was saved by design by good people, special agents, the rank and file, good guys that want to do good. You believe that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that because I think the rank and file wanted the FBI to be restored to what it used to be before the weaponization of law enforcement. And so what we have to do is methodically catalog all this stuff. We're triaging computer hard drives from previous directors and deputies. We're looking at the totality of information. We're finding jurisdiction. And by the way, I'm not looking at it in one jurisdiction. I've launched this investigation in multiple jurisdictions, and I can tell you that because I got the permission of the Attorney General to tell you that. And I can tell you the following too, because if it's of such importance. Russiagate 1.0, they did it again. And we found them. We found the documents.
All right, I wanted to
Key. Number one, investigation is hitting multiple jurisdictions. We know that Director Wray visited every one of there's 56 field offices. He visited all of them annually, sometimes twice a year. We know because of the SDNY issue, we know because of Georgia, and we know because of now North Carolina and DC. We know at least, and obviously Florida, we know at least where some of those grand juries are seated. I want you to pay attention to what he says after this.
I want to go back because for people that didn't live this, I lived this for years of my life. You lived this with Devin on the House Intel Committee. Now you're living it as the FBI. I'm living it because I want to get to the bottom of it still. We've all been vindicated at different times, be it the Mueller report or the Durham report or whatever came out. Oh, we were right and the rest of the legacy media mob was wrong. Adam Schiff is a congenital liar. Sue me, Adam. He's a congenital liar. So we started with Comey, that press conference. Here's where things get very interesting, though. And this becomes, I think, the beginning of this grand conspiracy that continues. And I want you to explain it, not me, but start with Hillary Clinton bought and paid for dirty Russian disinformation dossier. She uses money. They hire Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS hires Christopher Steele. He has a series of documents that he puts together. They're all complete bullshit in the end. But that then becomes the dossier. Okay.
And the media was in on it. Remember,
Yeah.
they used circular reporting. They leaked that information to the media. Remember what then Deputy Director Andy McCabe in,
That's where Michael Isikoff comes in. They leaked it to him.
who's constantly on TV talking about the integrity of the FBI. As Deputy Director of the FBI, he impermissibly and without permission leaked information about the Hillary Clinton investigation to the media.
Yeah.
Then
I'm going to remind you about McCabe. When McCabe eventually got fired, standing outside the DOJ, what they call main justice in DC, there was a presser with McCabe's lawyer, and his lawyer said, we can't look at all the documents, quote, because they're under seal. So if you want to know who the main perpetrator is, it was McCabe.
on top of that, when he was investigated by the Department of Justice, he lied to them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And the result of that investigation, Rosenstein went right up to him and said, you've got to go. He lacked candor because of the lies he had made, because he lacked candor. I don't know if you guys remember when that all came out. He was immediately fired.
oh, yeah, I'm not going to be taking any lectures on ethics and how to run the FBI from a then deputy director who abused his position to continue the weaponization of justice. And we're looking at that. And the scheme you just laid out, is the exact same scheme they replicated when Donald Trump decided to run again. And that's the investigation I'm tying everything to.
I would argue there may be three, but we'll get to that. Let's go in chronological order. Okay. So they knew, even Brennan knew the dossier was political back, and he was warning the administration at the time, that's Obama, that she's putting together this dossier on Donald Trump. Okay. Bruce Orr, a little interesting, his wife worked for Fusion GPS, put it together. Didn't he warn that it was political and shouldn't be trusted in August of 2016?
He absolutely
John
did.
Brennan
And Bruce Orr.
They all knew it was bogus. I mean,
They all knew.
But just think about this, Sean. Take a step back.
Did you catch Hannity's questioning there? Anybody? Do you understand what Hannity is asking about?
About Bruce Orr and Fusion GPS?
No. Both Brennan and Bruce Orr warned the administration, which is true, about the dossier being developed. That was before Bruce Ord, before Nellie Ord, by the way, got planted into Fusion GPS. They both warned about this. This is
Yeah, that was
also
before-
right before the new, the IA, right? The intelligence assessment, the new one, the second one.
Yes.
So I know I've said this many times and people go, it's a bridge too far for me. Be careful who you think is bad. Because the IA, the Carter Page FISAs, they were both a sting. All of that. They got people on the record. So we'll just wait and see how it plays out. But does it make sense that they're going to warn about a dossier and then be a part of a Russiagate? Valid question, no?
You couldn't write it this good if you tried.
Right. Glad I'm going through this video.
Then the then director of the CIA, the then Associate Deputy Attorney General of the Department of Justice for the United States of America, along with other bad actors that we've identified, including the media and Fusion GPS, got together and continued that narrative anyway, because then President Obama said, we have to be able to say what? The one thing that they needed to be able to say to take a wrecking ball to President Trump's presidency before he got in the door, that there was Russian collusion.
Okay, so now take it a step further. That becomes the basis of not one, but 4 FISA warrants, even though it was unverified and unverifiable because it wasn't true, correct?
Yeah. And when we first informed the FISA court of that, when I was working on House Intel, they wrote us a letter back and said, you guys are dead wrong. Fast forward.
The FISA court wrote that to you?
And
I didn't know that.
And fast forward, later on in our investigation, the FISA court would quietly put out an opinion themselves stating that we are rescinding. I don't think that's ever happened before. We are rescinding the FISA warrants that were used to illegally surveil President Trump.
When was this?
This was.
Okay, so that gets back to the documents I was showing you. In April 2016, they came out with the, it was a scathing review of the FBI on their use of the 702 database, the FISAs. They did not connect the dots. That's what he's talking about here. The FISC notified Kash Patel that he was completely wrong because Carter Page was a Title I. It wasn't the same thing. It wasn't until Horowitz did his review that came out in December 2019, where they then said, based on what Horowitz reviewed, they rescinded the authorities for any of the signers to ever file a FISA again. I agree with Kash. I don't know that that's ever happened before. That was a big move. I don't think they sent a letter to Kash saying, I'm sorry, we goofed, we were wrong. But that's the story he's telling you right there.
It was about a year after our investigation was completed, probably 2018.
Okay, so by that time, the year of spying was over. Carter Page's life was ruined, and they had a backdoor to the Trump campaign and Trump world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, by the way, you can't even write this in a spy novel.
No, Hollywood couldn't come up with it.
You couldn't come up with a story.
No.
Okay, so now we're going to go in a little bit deeper. Of the 4 FISA applications, because they have to get renewed every 3 months, 3 of the 4 of them were signed by James Comey. At least 3 or 4. He signed the first 3. Mm-hmm. And I think, who was it? Rod Rosenberg, I think, signed the 4th one.
Well, so FISAs have to be signed by 2 people.
Yeah, correct.
On the Department of Justice side, out of the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General.
Right.
And on the FBI side, out of the Director of the FBI or the Deputy Director of the FBI.
Now, when you fast forward a couple of years later, and Lindsey Graham was doing the questioning, and everyone that signed those FISA warrants was asked, knowing what you know now, would you sign the FISA warrant? Every one of them said, oh, no, not knowing what I know now. Here's the problem I have with that.
Hang on, let me hit pause on that for a second.
But
knowing what you know now, why didn't they bother to figure it out then? Why didn't the FBI under Comey And why didn't the FBI and DOJ under Rosenstein and company and McCabe and all those people bother to do the verification?
Okay, can somebody hazard a guess as to why it went that far? Anybody? Why would you bestow all these accolades on the FBI at a time when there's this major investigation and all these FISAs? You already know that there's a 702 issue. Why did nobody connect the dots to a Title I issue? Why do you think it took all this time? And it was 2020 before the FISC actually spoke up. Can you hazard a guess? Nobody?
Well, weren't they compromised? The FISC itself?
We don't know that for sure. We've always wondered, but we don't know that for sure. This isn't about the FISC. Why didn't Ray? First of all, we already know McCabe was he was running point, right? He was, in fact, remember, Paige, the Paramore, Strzok's Paramore, she worked directly for McCabe. And you got Peter Strzok, but you've also got Ray, you've got Rosenstein, Rosenstein was DOJ, but you've had all these other people. You had Dana Boente was also part of this. You've got several people involved with this, keeping very quiet until after when? Very quiet until Horowitz finished his review. And what do we know about Durham? He was working directly with Horowitz, remember? And I've already told you, we've got several names already. I mean, I don't know how many people have ever heard the name Curtis Hyde. He admitted all that information out of the FISA applications that they used to surveil Carter Page. I already told you about Soma. Remember, Grassley was the one that gave us Brian Aughton's name, remember? There are other people involved here. If you're going to catch them doing something illegal. And remember, after Horowitz issued his report, Carter Page filed a lawsuit against the government. It was just settled within the last couple of weeks, and he got $1.25 million out of the government for ruining his life. So you got to ask the question, well, where's the rest of it? Well, he's individually suing all the players. There's still more coming. And it seems to be really hot on the table right now, don't you think? Anybody have any comments? Because we are now at 10 minutes till. What does anybody have to say? Should I play out the show with the video?
This confirms Bowditch is coming in play, and this is why he was posted in queue.
Yeah?
Hands down, like this, just right when he said it. There are good people in the FBI, directors and deputies.
And I think they had people working with them that were key to some of this. Somebody had to collect all that information, and I don't think Ray personally collected it all. I think there were several good people who were doing that, and it was a project, if you will. And because one of the questions I've had from the beginning about those burn bags, I've used burn bags in the past. They're numbered. And when they go to dispose of them, there's an accountability for all the numbers. And if there's a group of bags missing, you literally turn the building upside down and shake it out to find those missing bags. So the fact that they had these burn bags that went missing and nobody did an audit is really kind of interesting, don't you think? More good than bad, right?
Good guys in all the departments.
Say that again.
Maybe even the cleaner. good guys in all the departments.
Yes. And who are they going after? I'm going to key in again on what he said. A 30-year investigation. You think Durham earned his retirement?
And it would have had to have been ordered from someone pretty high up, right?
Yes.
I mean, you ain't going to get no senior FBI investigator, even the senior one, with the ability to preserve all those very important
He
documents.
had to have had high-level authority to do that. Somebody that can run cover.
That could run major cover to get everything in there and hidden.
And we're talking years of documents. We're not just talking 1 year. We're talking years of documents. Which is really intriguing when you add all of this up. The more good than bad is coming out more and more, don't you think?
Right. And then you add in the trust Ray, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
And don't forget, Ray's a sleeper. Remember?
He's a sleeper. That's right. Wow. There's just too much there for me to just to blow off.
Thank you, Lindman. Oh, I know I've got to go back and do all of this. I haven't seen Lynn M. Marn. I know I got that wrong probably, but she just gifted me $50. But I've also, Victoria gifted me a set of shades. Sean Joe gifted a can. Dixie gifted a phone. Said, love you, Feisty Cat. Yeah, that was when we were having all those sound issues. Sanjo gifted a cookie. Thank you so much, you guys. Casey gifted a ship. Thanks for all you do. I appreciate that. And Mitchell DM27 gifted a ship. My God, you guys are so nice to me. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do. Even when I cheat and play a video and talk through it, right? So, appreciate it. I very much appreciate all of you. So, there's more to this. We're not even halfway through. We're, God, it's an hour and 50 minutes long. We're not quite an hour through. There's so many more nuggets in this. But what I want to point out is you're hearing all kinds of noise. You've got to step back because we couldn't be here if it was all as corrupt as people are thinking. We couldn't. There's no possible way. There had to have been good people doing hard work all along. And I think what Cass just laid out was that bitter truth, right? That there were people who had to watch the weaponization, knowing that the bigger catch is what? This is an international, it's a global effort to take down the president of the United States. That's a little bigger than a Kevin Kleinsmith. Does that make sense? And if we're going to do this right, and you heard Cash say it, we've got one chance. We got to do this right. Any other comments? You guys are so quiet.
I'll listen to this again.
Yeah, there's more to the video, believe it or not. There's a lot more, but I don't have time to play it. It's almost 6 p.m. My time. But I will. The link is in my chat. I will also drop the documents because I very carefully, setting up for today, went and found them all. So I've got the documents. I will drop them. You can see it for yourself. You can go through the timeline yourself, and you can see what I've been saying all along. This is a much bigger story than people think. A much bigger story. And the effort put into taking out Trump. Why would they do that? Why was Trump such a threat? Go back to the days of the mob in New York City. He may not have been a direct source for the FBI, but he definitely was working with one of them. And I think the mob guy that flipped was his handler. But nevertheless, that's wherever you go, whatever you think about, remember that a story like this just doesn't end without getting all of the story. And Kash Patel today gave you a really big piece of it. I hope this show did recover its justice the best I could. There's so much more. I could take another 2 hours on this. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end since there doesn't seem to be any comments. I am going to end this with my favorite. Thank you, Mr. Leota. My favorite exit. Have a good day, everybody.
In the fire, the veil is torn and the seeker never tired. Scrolls of the ancients carved into stone. She reads between lines while the empire grows. The priesthood of medicine, prophets of law. She claws through the curtain, exposing the flaw. No map, no guide, just shadow she tracks. Every thread pulled is a world turned back. The faithful will know, though the words may be few. To the blind, every truth is a riddle untrue. Claws of reason, eyes of flame, unmasking the player in the shadow game, where the silence breaks. The hidden shade. She names the unspoken. The world away. Historian's eye on the ruins of men. Cycles repeating again and again. Digital soldier, a phantom, a spark. A voice through the wires ignites the dark. Voice of iron, breath of dust. Piercing the empire built on rust. Keeper of the flame, she stakes her claim. Illuminates the nameless, calls them by name. Through Babylon's towers, through Rome's broken gates, she carries the question that history hates. No creed, no tyrant, no mask will remain. When the feisty one whisper your true name. Claws of reason, eyes of flame, unmasking the players in the shadowed game, where the silence breaks, the hidden shakes. She names the unspoken.